So I'm Loren Larsen, I'm the CTO at HireVue, and I was going to ask to talk about AI and machine learning. We've been doing that at HireVue for a while. So I thought about what could be useful to this group. First, I guess I'd love to know just, I've already prepared slides in the talk, but it would be good to know just kind of what experience people have with AI. Who in the room has kind of done a lot of machine learning, a lot of AI, just by raising their hands, or feel really comfortable with it? And how many people are actually interested in it who haven't done it? Okay, so most of the room is at least interested in the topic. Okay, so, and then how many people have heard of HireVue? How many people actually taken a HireVue? Okay, a few people. Okay. For those who don't know what a HireVue is, I'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, HireVue is a company that has been interviewing people on video. And we've interviewed about 12 million people, and about 6 years ago we started using AI to predict who'd be good at a job. So I'm going to come to that in a minute. I wanted to just brainstorm what are some uses of AI today. Handwriting, real estate, image recognition. If you've ever taken any AI course online, you've probably looked at those. People are using to play games. Then you start to get into things like facial recognition. You're walking down the street, it knows who you are, it knows where you're going. Loan applications. Who should stay in jail is a really interesting one. Guiding sentencing guidelines. Self-driving cars and drones, and job performance, which is what HireVue focuses on. So the important thing I think about this slide is just these last few categories are things that are really important to people's lives. The decisions that are being made by algorithms are incredibly important. So my talk's going to talk a fair bit about kind of what we've learned at HireVue about making decisions about jobs, who should get a job, who'd be best at a job. And it's a really, really important decision. If somebody gets that job, if they get that shot that they might not have otherwise had, it could change their lives. We've had people interview from, literally you see a video of somebody interviewing for a job in front of a grass shack in Africa. And what that probably means is they live in a grass shack in Africa, and it's the first time that they've had a chance to get a high-paying job with an oil company that's going to let them have enough money to send their kids to school. So it's important that this stuff works and that it be correct. So let me talk a little bit about the context of HR. I never thought I'd work in HR. There were a couple of things I never thought I'd work in. Games, HR, insurance, HR. Here I am. I've been working in it for 8 years. But what typically happens for a candidate is you apply, you create a resume, you write a cover letter, you send it in, something processes it, a human, something like that, and then it goes into a black hole and you never hear back. And you wonder, like, what happened? And then 6 months later, like, oh, we didn't have a role for you, thanks for applying. And that's a really terrible experience for anybody to go through, but that's kind of what's happening today. But the problem is that HR departments are just inundated, typically, with candidates. They're not really inundated with candidates, but they're so busy trying to find anybody at all who will apply, because they have like 100 jobs they're trying to fill, they don't actually have time to actually process all the things that are coming in. So there's a huge volume problem. We work with customers who literally, like Delta Airlines will hire 2,000 flight attendants a year. 200,000 people apply to be a flight attendant at Delta every single year. So they've just got this volume problem. How do they look at 200,000 people? How do they find the needle in the haystack? You can't do that with a human process. And the very best person for the job might be the 200,000th person that applied. Or it could be the first person in the middle. You just have no idea where that person is. So this seems like an area that's really useful for an algorithm to help with. So how does HireVue help with that? HireVue's been around about 15 years. We originally developed what's called an on-demand job interview, which is a one-way interview where somebody is invited to take an interview, they click a link, they open an app or they open a website on their computer, they're presented with a set of questions. You're asked question 1, you respond on video, you go to question 2, you respond on video, all the way through, and then that's been recorded, it's been uploaded, the hiring manager or recruiter gets a link to that, and then they watch you and decide if you're a good candidate or a bad candidate. So why is that a good idea? It seems like a very impersonal process. It seems like, why don't they just call you? The challenge is they can't call everybody. They're going to make a decision off of a resume, which means that when somebody applies for a job, the first thing you're evaluating them on is their resume writing skills, which is not actually a job qualification. We have a number of customers who will tell you, especially with certain populations like people on the autism spectrum, oftentimes the worst resume is the best candidate. You just can't predict that much from a resume. And so they're making a decision about a resume, and they're just saying, okay, well, I have time to phone screen maybe 10 candidates. And if there are 100 people apply, 90 people didn't even get a chance. They just got rejected off this resume. So what HireVue sort of let people do was, I'm not going to worry about the resume. I know it's not a great predictor. For somebody who just graduated from college, they all kind of look the same. There's not a lot on there. So they just invite everybody to take a HireVue. And then everybody gets a chance to sort of tell their story, describe who they are, what they're about, what they want to do. And then they can go through the HireVues. It takes longer to reject someone from a HireVue than from a resume, but everyone's had a chance to be seen, to tell their story. It lets people interview who wouldn't otherwise have a chance. They work late night shift, they're in a different location. Goldman Sachs used to go to 200 schools. Now they don't go to any schools, and they interview at over 1,000 schools. So that person at New Mexico State, who would never have got a chance to work at Goldman Sachs, but they're really, really good at finance, now has a chance to work at Goldman Sachs. And what that also tends to do is increase diversity. So it increases ethnic and racial diversity, because they're going to schools that they don't normally go to. They used to go to Harvard, they used to go to Yale, they used to go to Princeton. It increases gender diversity. So we think this is a really important thing to be doing, and it's fundamentally changed the way that hiring gets done. So this picture here, I'll just allude to a little bit. This is an interview series that we do for software developers, which is you answer a couple questions on video, you play a couple of games. We've introduced cognitive games to measure thinking ability, problem solving, et cetera, which are kind of fun and engaging. And then you can have a coding test. So this is just one way that you'd sort of look at a broad range of abilities for a software developer. If you're hiring salespeople, it might be 2 games and 5 video questions that measure different competencies. Does that make sense? All right, so this is a resume. I just want to highlight a couple things about resumes. So we've got Jane Smith is the name. If that name were Sanjeev Gupta, or it was Xinhu from China, that person, the same resume with a different name can be anywhere from 2x to 3x to 10x difference in response rate. So someone who's Chinese might change their name and send the same resume out, and they'll get 10 times the responses than they would if it was their Chinese name. So this slide is kind of about the biases that we build up as humans in looking at something. Because a recruiter's sitting there and I've got 100 resumes, how am I possibly going to make a decision? We come up with shorthands. So we come up with where they worked last, what school they went to, what their GPA is, maybe what their address is, and then we put it into Google Maps and